Welcome back to another Mind-Espresso. These are 3 to 5 minute mind hacks from some of the top minds in the world that I've either interviewed or read. And today we're going to talk about the quality of your thinking, your decision making. Can you eliminate bias and eliminate motion and come to decisions that are really helpful in your life? And we're going to look at the work of Nobel Prize winning behavioral economist Daniel Kahneman, never took an economy class by the way, and his book Thinking Fast and Slow. And then I'm going to bring in an old columnist from Chicago named Mike Royko, who's got a great framework to help us sort through all this. First, let's talk about Danny, and I love that he calls himself Danny. Dan Kahneman, in his book Thinking Fast and Slow, he talked about 2 types of thinking. System 1 thinking, which is automatic thinking, heuristic thinking, and System 2 thinking, which is effortful thinking, framework thinking. Some people will call it critical thinking. And he said most of us are doomed because we're stuck in System 1 thinking, right? Automatic thinking. And System 1 thinking, automatic thinking, is fraught with errors. What the brain does is it tries to make sense of situations, right? Dan says the brain is a sense-making mechanism. It's always creating a story. Now, the problem now is the story that it creates in a very short period of time misses many pieces of the puzzle. This is perspective, data points, and any kind of rigor, right? And back in the day, when your main goal was to avoid getting eaten, right, or to find food, you could make sense of situations really quickly with System 1 thinking, heuristic thinking. You could look out, you could hear something bark, and then you could see trees rustle, then you go, I gotta run away. That's probably a coyote, right? Makes perfect sense. Problem is, we're in a multi-layered environment with so many different factors, it doesn't work at all. And the brain is actually programmed to reward you for good System 1 thinking. We've all had the aha moment. You're in the shower, you're like, oh, I'm brilliant. 2 days later, you're like, no, I wasn't. It was terrible. Like, what was I thinking? Right? Well, that's the brain, because when the brain makes sense of something, it actually rushes good chemicals into your brain, and it starts to solidify what's called a mental model. The brain creates this mental model, and then it doesn't want to let go of it. And it gets worse when you introduce emotion, because once you put emotion into it, now the brain says, really don't let go of it, which is why you see political debates that are all over the map and seemingly have no logic whatsoever going on, right? Because the brain gets emotionalized, protects the mental model. We have all these biases, confirmation bias, saliency bias, that are programmed into us to protect our System 1 thinking, and it's killing our decision making. Now contrast that with System 2 thinking. System 2 thinking is effortful thinking, it's framework thinking. It's when we bring the story to a situation, don't let the story evolve in our brain. And we think of all the parameters, not just the few that matter to us. We put together a process. And Dan says he really has no hope for humans when it comes to our ability to make decisions from a System 1 perspective. The only hope he has is creating process to think through decisions, and that we can do this as a group better than we could do it individually, because individuals have a hard time getting away from their biases. So now you're thinking, okay, System 1, System 2 thinking, I kind of get it. Well, how do I apply this? And now I'm going to bring in a guy named Mike Royko, who was a columnist in Chicago for a long period of time, and he had a strategy he called Wonder, Think, Know. Happens to be a brilliant strategy for dissecting your thinking. So let's take a sheet of paper in our heads, right? And we've got 3 columns: wonder, think, know. Wonder, these are your fears and hopes, or your dreads and desires. So about anything that you're considering, right? You have hopes and you have fears, and those are really driving your bus, right? We're emotional beings. Now, write what you think. Now, step 1 here between what you wonder and what you think is to say, is my thinking really based on my fears, or is it based on my hopes, right? And there you can see optimism and pessimism. Now, no. Write down absolute 100% unassailable facts in the 3rd column. And now look at your thinking and say, is my thinking driven more by my hopes and my fears, or is it driven by facts? And for most of us, the reality is that our thinking is driven by our hopes and our fears, right? Because that's the emotional piece of the puzzle. But when you do wonder, think, know, it makes you take your thoughts and make them explicit rather than implicit in your head, where your head can't make sense of them because it has all these biases, and you put it on a piece of paper. So wonder, think, know becomes a fantastic process for looking at a situation. Now, if you want to take this one step further, you add what I call 5 whys. After you look at your thinking, Ask 5 why questions. Why? I want a new car. Why? Well, my old car makes me feel bad. Well, you feel bad. Why? Well, it's not really the car, I guess. It's, I haven't been eating well lately. Oh, you haven't been eating well. Why? Well, I've been stressed at work. Oh, you've been stressed at work. Why? Well, actually, if you think about it, I really, I haven't been getting sleep and I haven't been getting exercise. And so I go to work and I drink a lot of coffee. Oh, so you haven't been getting exercise. Why? Okay, so you don't need a car. You need a gym membership, right? So if you go wonder, think, know, ask why 5 times, this will increase your critical thinking, right? And your ability to make good, solid decisions. And that is this week's Mind Espresso.